Welcome to Sports, Clicks, and Politics with your hosts, Ben Hussong and me, Shawn Hannon. Welcome to episode 80 of Sports, Clicks, and Politics. Season 3 episode.
Always, Shawn.
How was your week?
Yeah,
okay.
My wife took my daughter out of town, so I spent the weekend with my boys. We're getting the ice cream shop ready to open. We're reopening Charlie's Ice Cream on Saturday of this week. So we're excited about that, but a lot of work to be going into it. Got some projects done around the house, and then went over and watched the Bills clinch the AFC East for the second year in a row with some friends.
Dynasty almost.
I mean, let's ease up. Like, we're still celebrating division wins over here, so I don't think we're quite that level, but, you know.
Well, somehow the Steelers stuck in, too. So.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Tied the Lions, made the playoffs all in 1 year.
We'll get into that in a little bit, yeah.
I'm excited. How was your weekend?
It was good. Like I said, I actually tuned in to see a little bit of football just to relive some sweat, if you will. So the Steelers had a lot of that going on.
Sure.
Thank you for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Thank you for Urban Meyer for being terrible to get somebody else in there.
Yeah.
To give them a chance. But
you should also thank Carson Wentz.
Thanks to everybody. And we'll get into thanking the Raiders and that at the end, craziness. But before we do that, the obligatory call out to all the viewers out there to hit that like button, share this video with all your friends and family, and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll be notified when we go live, which is each and every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, almost every week.
It's like
80 times.
80 times in 2.5 years. It's not a bad run.
Yeah. So
that math does not work.
Yeah, it's close. It's what we had some off weeks there. That's all. So
we also didn't start in January,
right?
So we got that going for us.
So I want to play something right at the beginning of this. I sent this to you, and I'm only going to play a couple minutes of it because it's I don't know. I feel like it's like 20 minutes long, so I'm not going to play this. But maybe many of people, only because a lot of discussion, kind of like there's this visceral gut reaction from the mainstream media when certain things hit the zeitgeist, if you will. So this week's hitting is this mass formation psychosis.
Sure.
You know, we've gone through the ivermectin weirdness and like some crazy stuff, right? So like this seems to be the latest one. So I want to play a clip. Now this came out. Now this has 4.5 million views. So this came out. I feel like 5 or 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So like it's not like this wasn't the genesis of the whole discussion, but when the discussion started reappearing, I went back and watched this, and then I reshared it with you, and thought it was interesting.
We're going way out of order on the show right now, but
I'm only going to play this for a couple minutes just because I want to get it out of the way, and then we're going to go right back into the NFL. Just because I was going to play it right out of the chute, but we started talking too much NFL. Fired. But anyway, here we are.
God.
So anyway, this is a video called Mass Psychosis: How an Entire Population Became Mentally Ill. And this is from a YouTube channel called After School. And I believe the title of this comes from, it's a collaboration with the Academy of Ideas. So without further ado, let me play this for you guys. All right, so kind of a taste, I guess, of what they were talking about there. I feel like he may have been onto something.
I mean, it's a thing. I love that the defense of this by the other side is it's not even real.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Outstanding.
Even though they went through 5 years of that with Trump. All right, so let's go back to talking a little bit NFL. We've wet the whistle for the mass psychosis people.
Sure.
Obviously, week 18 this week. A lot of history made.
A lot of history made. Some of it good, some of it not as good.
All of it history just because they played a week 18. But anyway.
Colts became the first team since the merger to lose to a 2-14 team with a playoff berth on the line. And then the follow-up was with hundreds of clowns in attendance because apparently Jaguars fans dressed up as clowns and went to the game to voice their displeasure with the team. The better record. I didn't share this one with you yet, so I'm kind of springing this one on you, but I think this is my favorite stat. New York Giants setting some records themselves over here.
Okay.
Andrew Thomas had more receiving touchdowns than Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney combined, and he missed 5 games and is a left tackle. Left tackle Andrew Thomas, 1 touchdown pass, 1 touchdown catch.
It seems like a lot of equity in some pass catchers.
Kenny Golladay got paid $72 million to catch.
Toney was a first-round draft pick,
And then a first-round draft pick. So things are going well down in the Meadowlands. Obviously, right where you want to be as an organization.
Are they still in the Meadowlands?
I don't know. I call it the Meadowlands.
Maybe they are. They still might
they're
be.
in MetLife Stadium, but I think it's in the Meadowlands.
Okay, it might be.
I don't know. I don't care. My God. I mean, truly think about how impressive that actually is, that your left tackle has more touchdown reception. Like, imagine somebody offered you that prop bet at the beginning of the year.
I'd throw $1 down.
You'd probably make $1,000 on it
because
because it's so absurd that nobody would ever think that that could be the case. And yet here we are. New York also like doing QB sneaks from the 9-yard line. I love this team. I have no sympathy for you whatsoever. When your team is this bad for 17 years, I will give you some level of sympathy. Until then, I don't want to hear it.
Okay. Well, so let's go back to the AFC playoff picture a little bit. We discussed it a little bit because both of our teams, mine snuck in, yours is in. Titans are the number 1 seed.
Without Derrick Henry for half the year.
Yeah,
you saw that coming.
Right. Now, is there any talk of him coming back here?
Yes.
So for the playoffs, there's possible he might be back. That'd be fun.
For who?
Well, not for DBs in the open field.
No.
But the Chiefs are the number 2 seed. They'll end up playing my Pittsburgh Steelers.
Sorry.
This is a rematch of a game that the Steelers got waxed on like I don't know, like a month ago.
Can't wait for the sequel. Wonder how it's going to go.
Well, maybe they got some recon.
Yeah, they got plenty of recon. What they lack is talent.
Well, I mean, listen, 1 TJ Watt sack away from knocking Mahomes out of the game.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? I mean, they did lead the league.
Chad Henne still?
I don't even know. No, I hope not. They led the league in sacks again this year, the Steelers. So there's always that chance.
Telling me there's a chance.
And the Bills, you said to get the 3.0 with the Patriots?
Yeah. They see mid-season split, and now they're this one is obviously slightly higher stakes.
And then the Bengals get the Raiders, I'm guessing, yeah?
Yeah.
In the Raiders game, did you watch that Raiders?
I did, actually.
Yeah, so I watched it just because obviously after the you guys probably are aware that the whole NFL playoff picture got turned upside down when the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars upset the winning in Indianapolis Colts and in convincing fashion. I literally stopped paying attention. I'm like, this is 26-3. Like, this is over. Like, so I was like, all right, I guess I'll start watching the Steeler game.
Yeah.
And the Steelers were losing at that time. So, and then the end of the Steelers game was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Goes into overtime. Went into overtime.
Yeah. I saw that. And then we had to go watch the Bills-Jets kickoff instead of watching.
Yeah, well, priorities for you New York homers. Luckily, I have backup, so I got to watch the end of the Steelers game. And then we get to wait, through the whole 4 o'clock playoff picture. You get to kind of do your thing, and then the Steelers fans are all basically waiting around for the the last game of the season, trying to figure out. And lo and behold, that game goes into overtime.
That was amazing.
Tied.
I watched that
game. So the Steelers
game.
just needed not a tie. Right?
I watched that game just cheering for a tie. I'm sorry. That was the only reason I tuned in. I wanted them to tie.
So, but the better scenario is for them to tie and then go into overtime, and then for me, there to be the winner, because then you added all the extra freaking drama that was going on with this.
Sure, that went really well for you yesterday.
I mean, and the funny thing is and maybe did you watch all the way to the end?
Yes.
So maybe I'm wrong, but were the Raiders content on just running out the clock until the Chargers called timeout?
So I think the Raiders were going to do what they did no matter what.
Sure.
They were going to run the ball. They weren't kneeling on it. They were going to run the ball to try to get in the field goal range.
Wherever they were going to kick it.
And if you're going to try a 62-yard field goal. Wherever you are, you're trying.
And the kicker's good, so it wasn't like it was ridiculous.
Exactly. And it's all right, as long as you're close enough, you're going to kick a field goal and try. And if you win, great. And if you lose, it doesn't matter because you're going to the playoffs. You just can't lose. You can win or you can tie. So they were going to run the clock out and kick a long field goal. Everybody made such a big deal out of that timeout. I did not understand why. Like, who cares? He must not have had the right defensive setup in.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he waited the clock to run down before he called timeout.
He called with 4 seconds on the play clock. Like, this was not some let's preserve the time move. It was a, oh, shoot, we're not ready for this, and Josh Jacobs is about to run this ball 25 yards on us. Yeah,
and then obviously the next play, not only do they get the first down, he gets like an extra 5-8 yards, puts him easily in field goal range. And literally at this point, the Raiders could still take a knee. It's over, right? They literally could just run the clock out. The game is over. They're both going to the playoffs. Right. Now, you could say if I'm the Raiders, right? Because I think I heard him say this, that if the Raiders did tie, that they were going to be playing the Chiefs. Correct. So maybe playing the Bengals is like
better.
Yeah, better. I would think.
I would think so.
But in reality, anything could happen at any time, and taking a knee ensures you a playoff berth, right? And they don't. They go out and they kick the field goal. I mean, you could tell Collinsworth was basically hinting that he should take a knee. And it seemed like he was like, they could just take a knee. They could just be in and take a knee. It'll be over.
I think they made the right play.
Yeah, and I don't. There's a lot of this stuff in baseball. I feel like back in the day when I cared about baseball, about these these games down the stretch, and are you playing to win? Because a lot of these teams are, whatever it was. Like I said, I do agree that they weren't going to try to out-trick themselves. They were just going to be like, okay, we're just going to run this into the line, and then we're going to kick it. And like, if this happens, and we're going to go down.
We're just not going to lose
with integrity, but we're going to play it as safe as we possibly can.
Right. That was the thing, is we're just not going to lose. We're setting it up. We prefer to win the game because it's a competition, and we prefer to win the game because you'd obviously rather would play the Bengals than the Chiefs. I don't mean any disrespect.
There's got to be some level of satisfaction of knocking a team out that's right on the field with you too, right? It's like you're eliminating that team right in front of you. You just beat each other up for 3 hours. And so
I agree with all of that, but I think they did the right thing. Just run the ball. You take the ball, put it in your best player's hands, and let
the Chargers were just terrible down the stretch. They just didn't. They seemed like they were assuming they were going to take a knee and just didn't play for like a play.
I'm pretty sure Justin Herbert is the new Eli Manning. Like, where I don't know what he's looking at or where he's throwing the ball or what in the world he is doing for 8 plays in a row, and then just throws a dime for a touchdown pass, and you're like,
he's a gunslinger for sure.
Where'd this come from? It's amazing. Obviously, he's way more talented than Eli Manning, but it was just, that was the analogy that I could bring in my head last night, was this dude just shows up. All of a sudden, like, all right, well, now it's 4th and 11, so I'm going to try. And it's incredible. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a good game.
So yeah, and it was a great game. And like I said, obviously the playoff ramifications. I'm not sure. I'm sure there was a Steelers party someplace at one of these bars downtown, and they were all celebrating that. But anyway, so we get to look forward to at least 6 games next week, right? 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday.
Heck yeah, man! It's gonna be a football weekend.
A lot of football. So,
and the NFC is looking.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about the NFC, but I still think it's like the Packers and the Rams.
I don't know, man. The Buccaneers are legit too. I think.
The Buccaneers. Yeah, no, those 3, I guess. The Packers, the Buccaneers, and the Rams. Like I'm not sold on the Cowboys. Obviously, the Cardinals can beat anybody probably just because their quarterback is that good and their defense is okay.
I think the Cardinals can beat anybody and can be beat by anybody in this playoff team.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think that's probably true of anything, but they seem to be the most.
I mean, like I said, I was higher than them earlier in the year than I am now. I've said they don't have Hopkins still, right? I mean, he's out for the year.
No, I don't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's out for the year. But anyway,
listen, I think it was obviously a good weekend for the Steelers because everything went their way. It was a good weekend for Bills fans because obviously we made the playoffs. The Patriots didn't get to win the division. We did. And on top of that, it got even better today because the Dolphins have announced they are firing Brian Flores and sticking with Tua. I couldn't have asked for a better day than that. Like, thank you. Like, God, I was just thinking, man, the Dolphins, if they switch out their quarterback, Brian Flores is no joke as a coach. They got a talented roster. If they get a quarterback, they're going to be tough to contend with. And they responded by like, see you, Brian Flores. Tua's our guy. Like, oh, thank God you're still the Dolphins at heart. I really appreciate it.
And I thought as a side note, I just pulled this up too. So even with the Jacksonville win, they still got the first pick.
I know.
Because Detroit, they won too.
See? Detroit beat
they
the Packers.
beat the Packers.
Well, I mean, that was.
Right. No, I got
Packers had nothing to play for whatsoever.
Right. But still, the Jaguars literally won and lost nothing, right? So they got all the satisfaction of knocking
good
the team
day for
out
the
of the
Jaguars too.
Jaguars fans,
right?
I'm staying in Jacksonville on my way down to Florida.
Nice.
Yeah,
I've never been to Jacksonville.
Maybe I'll have to. Me neither. I don't think, but maybe I'll have to do some ceremonial Pittsburgh thing when I get to Jacksonville. So,
or just go yell Duval at the top of your lungs.
All right, so let's touch on one more sports thing that's in the news and. I don't know what to make of it yet. But
Political prisoner.
Yeah. Novak Djokovic.
Sure.
He's free.
Thank
I didn't
God.
have to do a free Djokovic thing. Do you think it's funny that his name is Novak? It's so close to Novak's.
I do.
I mean, it's
I
great.
appreciate the irony.
So, you guys may have heard he was detained as the Australian Open begins January 17th. So he was flying in there. He had a exemption for if you know, Australia is basically a Alcatraz at this point. So just bigger.
That's it.
So it's just basically locked. The whole island is basically on lockdown. So you had to, they're allowing all these players to come in for the Australian Open. And one of the majors in the tennis tournament, first of the majors, and Novak Djokovic is a very outspoken anti-vax athlete. Not in the sense that he's out there basically pushing, but it's well known that he's not vaccinated.
Taking it.
Right? Yeah. So, and he's very health conscious. He's had bouts with celiac disease, I feel like, and so he's gone through a bunch of stuff where he's very in tune with his body. And I'm guessing that the vaccine is not on his regimen. So
almost like he's a professional athlete.
But a judge in Alcatraz said that Novak is free to go. So he has been returned to the stadium to play tennis, barring any other, I don't know, detainment from the Australian government. But defending champion Novak Djokovic gets to, at least it appears as of today, right now, gets to defend his title.
Good.
The Alcatraz Open.
Good.
Yeah.
This is crazy. There's no reason for this. The guy's a professional athlete in tremendous health. Test him. Make sure he's negative on the PCR test, so there's no doubt, and an antigen test too. Go nuts. It doesn't matter. You got to stop. This the idea that they revoked his visa as soon as he got into
We're going to have a
Australia.
new Mount Rushmore. It's going to have Djokovic, Beasley, Rogers, Jonathan. No,
And Joe Rogan.
Kyrie Irving. That's my new Mount Rushmore. I just thought of that.
Let's start a GoFundMe. I don't know where we're going to build it, but we'll find
We have to
something.
get an artist.
Sure.
Yeah. So
good.
I think good. I mean, it's sad that it had to come to a judge.
This is crazy. We have lost our minds. Australia, God bless you.
No, we
have
haven't.
lost.
AP said we haven't lost our minds.
You have lost your minds.
Reuters said we didn't lose our minds.
Oh, thank God for Reuters and the AP. I love the fact check of mass formation psychosis is not a thing.
That doesn't exist.
That's
guys.
what? Do you think they just made these words up? What is wrong with you? Also, listen, not that it completely ties into a similar thing, but we had a local story that you shared with me in Syracuse of a woman escaped a torture.
No, we're going to talk about that.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't see it on the menu.
It's going to be in the last part of
Oh, my bad. All right, I don't want to give it away then. I almost spilled. We really have to do a better job of show prep.
No.
Fair enough.
We're good. I got you. You're good.
So, yeah, I do think it's good that he gets to play. I think it's insanity that they keep pushing the vaccine that we now know for certain doesn't work after 5 or 6 months, but they keep making you take it anyway, and then you got to get boosted. And now Ron DeSantis gets to take a little victory lap I told you they were going to change the definition.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all that too in the changing COVID science.
Sorry.
But I guess a win for the Aaron Rodgers.
Common sense is a win.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Let's talk about our favorite, or not our favorite, I guess. She's a terrible person in general, but
The topic that nobody is talking about, how's that?
I mean, people are still talking about it a little bit, but not. I mean, so Ghislaine Maxwell looks like there's going to be another trial.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like it's steamrolling that way, right? So
it does.
If you guys don't know, we covered the trial extensively here for 3 or 4 weeks. But one of the jurors, turns out, has come out and basically said that he was abused as a child, and now the defense lawyers for Ghislaine Maxwell feel like that he was a compromised juror and want a retrial, mistrial declared, and we get to do it all over again, I guess. You think maybe they'll find those tapes in time for the next one?
Yeah, that seems likely. They're out diligently looking for them. This is like when OJ promised to go find the real killers. They're not looking. It's too bad that it happened this way, but it is probably the right course of action, legally speaking, because you're supposed to have unbiased jurors that are rendering your verdict. And it would be very difficult to be truly objective if you yourself were a victim of childhood sex abuse and you are determining the fate of an alleged child sex abuser. I get it. It's too bad. But hey, if it keeps it in the news and it keeps people talking about it, it's probably for the best. Because honestly, I want the woman to go to prison, obviously, but
Yeah, it seems,
I want more names.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you just allow me to allow my brain to go wild, it seems like, let's plant this juror in here. We know we can just get a mistrial, and maybe we can get another extra 6-8 months of freedom for this terrible person. And, she's going to be in jail someplace, but it won't be the final answer. I guess she'll still think that there's some hope, and I don't know, whatever. It's all sham in general. So,
right.
So we get forward to looking for that, I guess, again. But anyway, you mentioned Joe Rogan, and you and I both got on Getter.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan basically taking out the mainstream media and Twitter simultaneously, as he's basically being like, I'm going to go mess around over here if anything weird happens over here on Twitter. So
a lot of people are taking that
stance. And we touched on this a little bit last week where we talked about the media and the media versus Joe Rogan, and following up with, do you know that McCullough interview has 50 million downloads?
I'm not shocked.
Or I don't know if downloads is the right term, but 50 million views or whatever. Crazy. That's the most downloaded podcast ever.
It's good information.
Sure. And so some of it has to be the Streisand Effect, right? So
yes.
There's all this crying and moaning going on about the video even existing,
sure.
And then people are like, oh man, I guess if people are moaning and groaning about it, I guess I'm going to go watch it.
I got to check it out.
So here we are, 50 million views later. I don't think we posted this last week, but we probably talked about it. So maybe you guys have saw this, the Q3 2021 media ratings that came out. So this was shared wildly on a lot of other social media sites. So this is millions of views, right? So this is average viewers per show in the millions. This is the sources are Nielsen and Spotify. Joe Rogan Experience, 11 million viewers per show. Tucker Carlson, the number one show on the news, 3 million, 3.24 to be exact. I'll read them down. The 5, 2.98. Hannity, 2.94. Fox News primetime average, the average of all primetime shows on Fox, 2.37 compared to 11 million per show from the Experience. The Rachel Maddow Show, for example, 2.20, 2 million, 2.2 million. MSE primetime, all of primetime, MSNBC, 1.27 million per show. CNN, bringing up the rear. Did you already probably saw this, but I'll have a guess. But 0.82.
Not even a million.
Not even a million per show. They're basically in free fall. That whole channel is basically in free fall. But is Joe Rogan mainstream now? Like,
I think mainstream is the wrong term. I think you got to use legacy media.
Okay, so I've heard that used. I've heard corporate media used.
That works too.
But corporate is not necessarily. I think the legacy probably is right because you're basically trying to overturn them, and they've been around forever, whatever it is, the historic media that has been informing us, quote unquote, for the last decades since television, is collapsing right in front of our face.
They deserve it.
And this doesn't even count like shows like, that we talk about the Breaking Points before with Sagar and Crystal, and like the Poolcast or whatever it is, the Timcast IRL. Like these shows are getting tens of thousands of views.
Right.
Like Tim Pool's livecast gets 30,000 views a night. I mean, he does 5 shows a night, every night for 2 hours, and it's 30,000 views almost every single night, minimum. So, and I can't believe that people still rely on the quote unquote legacy media for their information. It's like, so they still matter. They disproportionately matter for the news that they're giving, clearly, right? Would you agree with that? So how does it flip? I mean, is there just a tipping point with the people? I mean, is it just a culture thing?
I think that it's going to be kind of morbid, so, bear with me. But the older people that are very accustomed to getting their news that way will die. And when they die, there is nobody replacing them, because what used to happen was people didn't watch the news until they got older. So when people died, more people came in and the viewership remained stable because younger people typically don't really care about watching the news. That's been the case for decades. Now, younger people actually are intrigued, but they're not turning to legacy media or legacy news organizations. They're turning to the internet. They're turning to Joe Rogan. They're turning to Timcast. They're turning to Crystal and Sagar. They're turning to Jimmy Dore. They're turning to people on the left and the right. I mean, you can go and get whatever side you want, and you can get much more objective, or at least people that acknowledge their bias, people that don't pretend to be objective. Like, you can go and get conservative news that is conservative news. You can go get socialist, liberal news, and that they just come right out and tell you, like, Jimmy Dore is a socialist. Doesn't mean he's wrong. He's very entertaining. I think he does a great job. I've watched his show, and it's wonderful information.
Yeah, I watch his show a lot.
He's great. So I think that this is happening because the legacy media just refuses to acknowledge they have a problem. They keep trying to act like they're still in charge. But the reality is, these podcast people, like, this is the scene out of Captain Phillips. Like, hey, I'm the captain now. Like, You're not in charge anymore. Sorry. More people are going to be influenced and I guess entertained, influenced, and informed by an average podcast by Joe Rogan than will watch the entire programming of a week's worth of CNN news. You don't have the reach anymore. Like, you can't compete with this man because Joe Rogan is not like a genius. He's not coming through with these nuanced takes on everything. He just asks really good questions, and he's trying to learn.
Yeah, he just comes across as, like, credible and honest, right?
Right. I mean, and it's just, look, I might be wrong on this. This isn't my thing. And it's very little ego. And I think that's what makes him, in particular, so much further ahead than everybody else. And also, he's been doing it longer. He was doing his podcast even when nobody really understood what a podcast was. It wasn't a thing, but he was diligent and disciplined about doing his regularly. And his thing was just, I just want to ask more questions. I don't want sound bites. I want to have 3-hour-long conversations with people I find interesting and share them with others. And it's turned into a great platform, and there's a large demand for that.
Yeah, and he went to Spotify for a reason, and his demand is second to none. And like I said, I don't know when this article is as of Tuesday morning, so I think this was last Tuesday. Over 500,000 new subscribers to get her. So he clearly has influence.
See, we were ahead of the curve. I think it was really us, and then Joe Rogan's just riding our coattails because we did go like 2 days ahead of him.
No, I think I joined the day he did, actually.
All right. Well, I was ahead of you, so you're
I just knew El Gato Malo was on there, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, I got to go back on here and get some El Gato Malo.
I actually went on what the impetus. I've been thinking about doing it for a while. It was when Tim Pool actually put something out on Twitter that somebody else got censored and kicked off Twitter, and he goes, 2022 is not going to get better. If you're going to try to stay ahead of the curve, you better get over there right now and get on it because this isn't going to stop. And it just made me think, like, yeah, there's no reason to think they're going to stop censoring people. There's no reason to think that they're going to reverse course. This is who they are.
It doesn't seem it. So
I think it's a good idea. Get on Getter. It's free. There's no real downside to it.
It's another version of Twitter, basically.
Just don't let it turn into like the alt-right super shit, all right? So just, if you're going to go there, don't start being like that, please.
Yeah, some of that's already there.
I'm aware, but right now we can still fight it and balance it a little bit.
That's true. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk COVID/vax mandates.
Sure.
So maybe you guys are aware, but the Biden's vaccine mandate has reached the Supreme Court. So oral arguments were yesterday, or was it Friday?
Friday.
So oral arguments on Friday. Basically, it turned into arguing who had more data on their side, basically for the what it seemed that the justices were arguing for the validity of the mandate itself as opposed to the law that was actually being. I mean, there was a lot of information about COVID being disseminated, which I thought was kind of irrelevant for Supreme Court justices.
It's not, because the question hinges on, is there a sufficient reason that you could revoke some basic rights? Because there is case law to support that there is, in times of genuine emergency, if the circumstances warrant it, you can suspend certain rights temporarily. But it's a very, very high threshold to hit. So that's why they were discussing.
I mean, ask the Japanese in World War whatever too.
Right?
The threshold wasn't that high.
I mean, that was insanity. This is a tangent. I'm sorry, but I just feel the need to bring this up every single time that the opportunity presents itself. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the worst president we have ever had. He was a horrific human being that did god-awful things, including interning Japanese American citizens. He confiscated the gold, made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own it, and then jacked the price up 300% once it was all turned in. Stop lionizing this man. He was an awful, awful person.
End rant?
Yeah, I'm good. I just had to get that off my chest. Every time the opportunity presents itself, I have to point that out.
Duly noted.
Thanks.
So
I feel better now.
So we'll see how this progresses here, but obviously this was it seems as though there was some questions left with the ability for this mandate to actually be implemented. So they were pretty, they grilled the OSHA people, the OSHA lawyers pretty good, I guess. So
I love that Justice Sotomayor brought up the fact that there was 100,000 children in critical care.
I'll bring that up right now for you if you like.
Thanks. Yeah,
Sotomayor, false claim that over 100,000 children are in serious condition with COVID. Mr. Hussong, do you know how many children have been hospitalized, I think the number is, with COVID since the beginning?
I want to say, is this the number that's like 3,340?
I think it's like 82,000 total, right? So like, it might even be cases. So like, all I know is her number. I don't even know where she got her number from because that many kids haven't been
made it up.
There hasn't been that many kids sick from COVID, and she just said there's 100 serious condition, many on ventilators.
That's just not true. Like, you want to know where she got that number from? That number is based on FHA. That's it. FHA means from her ass. That's where that number came from because there is no, I know this data fairly well.
I don't even know where she got it from.
No, and the idea that 100,000, I love they always use round numbers for this stuff. Like, well, we need a 70% vaccination rate, like not 69, not 71.
Never
it just
69.
happens to be 7. You couldn't help yourself, could you?
No.
God love you. All right. Anyways, for her, like, this is what I mean about the ignorance that is on display, and they just can't broadcast it fast enough of how little they know.
All right. Well, so, and unless there's more you want to talk, I mean, listen, so I was going to try to find the Babylon Bee real fast, but there's something like, even my favorite justice there, Gorsuch, said something to the effect of like hundreds of thousands of people die from the flu every year.
No, he didn't actually say that. That got corrected.
Okay, so what?
He said the flu every year kills hundreds, thousands of people.
So
not hundreds of thousands.
So the transcript
has been updated.
Gotcha.
Right. He was misquoted in the transcript. He said hundreds, thousands of people every year, not hundreds of thousands of people every year.
And so, but basically there was a lot of, the biggest take that seemed to come from some people who were paying attention to the arguments were that the justices were ill-informed on most of the COVID data that's readily available to people anyway, which is kind of scary that they're ruling on us over here. But so let's
study found Supreme Court has now shared more COVID misinformation than your crazy Facebook account.
Yes, pretty close.
That's outstanding. The Babylon Bee is a gift.
Yeah. All right. And
Anyways.
so let's talk about, and this is stuff that we have talked about, I would say at end here for almost from the beginning of the show's inception, which is the data that we've been seeing that we knew was different than what was being reported, right? So these are things and a varying degree of stuff. I feel like the first thing that was these breakthrough cases and, these vaccines don't stop transmission. Okay, so they don't stop transmission. They just keep you from getting in the hospital, right? So like that switched, right? First, these vaccines were going to,
you want to start there?
They were going to get us to herd immunity, whatever. So
let's go back further about science.
Sure. I only put this up there because in the order of breakdown, that one came first, right?
The first one that they lied about, just blatantly.
Not that they lied about, that they broke that. So this is the first one I feel like in the chronological where she said, okay, they had to admit the breakthrough cases were a thing, I guess. So, 8 months ago. So they had to admit that first.
Sure.
But that's the first thing I feel like there. But listen, we can go on. There's more. So, listen. Same, Rochelle Walensky. CDC reveals COVID tests can now show positive 12 weeks after infection. So, right, this is PCR stuff, right? We've been talking about this. We had Kevin McCarran and we interviewed him, multiple interviews. They have not been removed yet, so go get those while you can. But he basically pointed this out and said, yeah, you're positive. You could be positive. I think that he actually used 75 days, which is, almost
bonkers.
12 weeks.
Right.
And so his basically saying that we were in a case-demic, right? So we were having all these positives, and this doesn't even count the psychothreshold part. This is just the fact that the virus stays in your system. The test is so good at what it does that you can't use it to determine infection, right?
It's not a yes-no.
Right. It's so good at what it does that this is not a yes-no. It should not be used as a yes-no. Right. And it was used as a yes-no, flat out, end of story. And that inflated all the numbers. Every single number that has ever been associated with COVID is inflated because of the PCR test.
Agreed.
And so, and then again, we had the psychothreshold thing that you talked about for the NFL. I figured this out. Like there's other things going on with psychothreshold thing too, on top of the PCR. And then let's bring up what you brought up last week, which was Dr. Scott Gottlieb talking about, says cloth face masks don't provide a lot of protection against COVID. His quote, cloth masks aren't going to provide a lot of protection. That's the bottom line. This is an airborne illness. We now understand that. And a cloth mask is not going to protect you from a virus that spreads through airborne transmission. Well, Mr. Hussong,
it's amazing how the science
literally led the league in mask discussion in the last 2 years was you. So
I think so.
Basically, maybe they're binge watching our shows a little bit here.
I mean,
it doesn't even stop there. And then I'm going to go one more, and then I'm going to let you fill in wherever you want.
Okay.
Because I think this is the biggest elephant in the room. Or whatever Fauci animal is abusing these days. But Fauci, more children hospitalized with COVID during Omicron wave doesn't imply that they are hospitalized because of COVID. So this is something we've been talking about, again, for probably a year and a half, that when somebody has tested positive through the PCR, that doesn't mean they are infectious and sick. So these people could be incidental contacts. They're not in the hospital because of COVID. They're there for some other reason. Some of them ridiculous, like bus accidents and broken legs. Some of them less ridiculous, like heart disease and cancer and other things, where they're terminally ill, almost on the borderline death. And they're just with COVID. They just have it by incidental. It has nothing to do with their actual deaths, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is the one that is the biggest, I feel like the biggest. I mean, we can still argue about masks. Now they're going to try to mandate N95s and whatever. So, but this anomaly within the numbers goes all the way to the 830,000 death numbers, right? So all of these numbers are impacted by this. So Fauci here is admitting that, even though he's narrowly focused talking about children in hospital, but that applies to every bit of data, every single case count that we've had from the beginning. They're literally just using the same things that we used a year and a half ago, citing, and they're just literally just regurgitating the same talking points that we were saying a year and a half ago. It's crazy.
Yep. So if you have children listening, you might not want to let them listen for a few minutes because there's no way I'm going to get through this without cursing. It just seems very unlikely because it just gets me so angry having watched this play out and then watching them hide under the excuse of, well, the science changed. No, it didn't. The science has been, it's because you played for the 1% exception a year ago and 2 years ago, and some of us were saying, there's no way that's going to work out that way. You should play for the 99% rule. Like, the first one, chronologically speaking, was, well, it appears that there's no chance this could have escaped from a lab. This definitely escaped from nature. That is conclusive, and it has been debunked, this theory. And then some of us read what they offered and went, well, that's not true. I'm not telling you it did come from a lab, but you can't rule that out. There's no way. That's crazy talk. A couple weeks later, well, it's possible. Then it was, well, we did not fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab. 6 months later, okay, we did, and we're sorry. Oh, okay, after you accuse everybody of being debunked. Now, as far as what they have done and why it actually makes me mad, look, government covering up their own incompetence and shady dealings is nothing new. If you did fund gain-of-function research, your tax dollars funded gain-of-function research similar to what we are experiencing right now with COVID. Your tax dollars also went to literally torturing beagles to do a study on pain. Dogs, just innocent dogs, and then clipping their vocal cords because the cries were so horrific the researchers couldn't deal with them. Your tax dollars paid for that. Congratulations. That's what we're funding in our science, in our government. Now, the science changed. No, it didn't. I think you and I were discussing in May, or it may have been June of 2020, that it was very clearly aerosolized transmission and not droplet transmission. That the idea that you could have this much, there's two ways it could have been explained of how many people were getting sick. Either it's aerosolized transmission, the particles are hanging in the air and it's infecting people all over the place, or it's droplet transmission only, not aerosolized, and asymptomatic spread is everywhere and rampant. Now, historically speaking, we've never had a respiratory virus that spreads via asymptomatic transmission. It has never happened. Whereas almost all of them have been spread via aerosolized transmission. And somehow they concluded droplets. It's got to be droplets and asymptomatic. A year later, May 7th, the CDC just updated its website, May 7th, 2021, and said, yeah, it spreads via aerosols too. But it still spreads via droplets. Yeah, if I spit in your mouth, I'm going to get you sick. But other than that, this is ridiculous. The other thing they lied about, surface to surface transmission seems to be a big factor. We're over here washing groceries that get dropped off at our house. And again, then you start looking into the background and you're going, well, it's never been the case before. Well, this is a novel virus. Like, yeah, but we've had coronaviruses before. This would be really odd. So I get it. For like 2 weeks, it probably made sense. How long did we have to deal with it? We still had people handing out hand sanitizer at stores. Like, this is not how it spreads. This is crazy. And finally, they acknowledge it months later and say that. But again, if you always play for the 1% exception, of course you're going to be wrong most often. The science did not change on that. Masks. Oh my God, masks. I have never seen a collection of worse scientific evidence in my entire life than what was purported to be in support of masks. Well, we put it on a dummy, and we measured the droplet spray when we squeezed it of how far it shot out before it had a mask on, and then we put a mask on it, and it shot less. That was an actual study that has been cited multiple times to demonstrate that cloth masks offer protection against the spread of COVID-19. Somebody paid people to do that test. Think about that for a minute. How dumb you have to be to not know, yeah, if you cover something up, of course it's going to transmit less far. This is just common sense. So there's still a study on a CDC website in support of their view that asymptomatic transmission accounts for 50% of the spread. It was a nursing home in Seattle, Washington, where they only assumed droplet transmission was possible and aerosolized transmission was a non-factor, and concluded that 50% of the people got it asymptomatically. That's crazy. How do you make that mistake in a nursing home? That many people, and it's still up there 2 years later, even though we all know that it's aerosolized transmission. Now, they had to acknowledge it because the evidence was so overwhelming they could no longer deny it. It was an embarrassment that it took them that long. So then once the aerosolized transmission came out, they came out with like, well, it still blocks some particles. Okay, but it's not effective. And I think Megan Maxwell, we had her on the show, and she does this, or did this for a living. She tested masks, and she was a PPE expert. And I'm going to be generous with her presumption here. If your mask allows more than 5% of particles to escape, it will have zero statistically significant impact on reducing transmission. All it takes is 5% of the particles. 18% of aerosolized particles escape out the sides of your stupid mask, okay? Never mind what goes through it because it does nothing. And then these idiots came back with, well, of course it doesn't protect you, but it protects others. Wait a minute. So the air on the way in is all getting in. We acknowledge that. It's getting through the filters in the mask. It's coming in the sides. But on the way out, it's not. People are idiots. How do you get on board with this? So now they come out and say, hey, masks, now we know, yeah, they don't work against an aerosolized transmission. Oh, the science changed again to what exactly we've been saying for 2 years and getting laughed at and called idiots and science deniers. Weird how it went that way again. The next crazy one was what happened with hydroxychloroquine. That was insanity, watching that play out in real time, where some doctors came out and said, hey, we know chloroquine does have effect against coronaviruses in the past. It seems reasonable that we should try this because it's a great safety profile, and when administered early, it appears to really help save lives. And then some study out of the Lancet came out, done by Sturgisphere, where they claim to have an international hospital registry with real-time updates from hospitals in every major continent in most major countries to track actual reactions. And they concluded that the people that were given hydroxychloroquine not only were not having better results, they were dying. They were experiencing cardiac problems and dying. And our fearless leader, America's Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's been in the role for 30 years, his reaction upon hearing this was not, there's an international hospital registry that tracks all this data in real time, and I never knew about it until right now? That seems fishy. What's Sturgisphere? Where did this company come from? How do they have this data? Oh, they have 11 employees? That seems legitimate. It would only take 500 people to actually track this database in real time. Huh, funny. That's weird. No, his reaction was, yep, hydroxychloroquine's killing people. We know it now. Settled. Settled science. That's not, I'm sorry, but it's disingenuous. You cannot believe that was an honest mistake because I can't believe Anthony Fauci is that incompetent, that he didn't know. Of course he knew, but he peddled it anyway because he's a liar. It's what he does. So then they trash hydroxychloroquine. Then ivermectin came out. Holy crap. Ivermectin, the safest drug that Big Pharma has ever made. Wonderfully effective at a lot of things. And some evidence, I'm not telling you it's conclusive, but some evidence that it has a reduction in mortality when administered early in COVID sickness. Great. We didn't even have a study on it. The NIH finally got around to funding one study on ivermectin, and the results will not be in until March of 2023. Meanwhile, there's about 70 trials and 50 randomized control trials demonstrating some positive benefit. So what do? We threaten to take doctors' licenses away if they treated somebody with ivermectin. Like, that's insanity. And we know fluvoxamine works. We know that there's a treatment protocol in place that has at least some effect, and even if it's not hugely effective, there's no downside. Nobody is going to die from taking ivermectin, fluvoxamine, hydroxychloroquine, and what was the other one that they're giving? Zinc and quercetin or whatever it is. Like, most of these are over-the-counter or exceedingly safe prescription drugs. That's the treatment protocol. Anybody ever die of those things, Shawn? Nope. Turns out that's not how it works. But you'd think that people were literally occupying emergency rooms in Oklahoma so much that gunshot victims could not be seen. Way to go, Rolling Stone. Way to destroy whatever credibility you had left. That's gone. You are a laughingstock. You've joined the legacy media. God, you used to be so cool, too, and now you suck. So anyways, that is another thing. Well, the science changed. No, it didn't. Ivermectin has had listen, if I was very sick with COVID, I would take ivermectin because there's no downside to it. Even if it doesn't work, even if it's just psychological benefit. Everybody, it affects everybody. It's going to come after your child. No, it's not. Unless your child is significantly sick, and I'm talking severe respiratory problems, unbelievable levels of obesity, or cancer, this virus poses virtually no threat to your children. None. They're not going to get sick. They're not going to get hospitalized. They're not going to die. Okay. Encourage pediatricians and parents to get their child vaccinated. You people are sick. You are fucking psychopaths. You're lying to people to scare them into administering some medicine to their children because you don't want to give them the real information and make an informed decision. You want to scare them into doing this? How do you sleep at night when you're doing this to people? I genuinely don't understand. There was never any reason for 99.9% of children to receive a vaccine. There is only risk. There is no benefit. Okay? That's craziness. You already went over the math, so I'm not going to, you went through the PCR test, so I'm not going to cover that. But that was obvious from the beginning that we were overcounting everything. And then people are coming out with these mathematical models and being like, see what could have happened? No, you're lying because and this is the thing. I'm not a genius. I'm not that smart. But if I can figure this out and be right this often, that means the other side is not trying to give you the truth. They are doing this on purpose. There's no way they're this dumb. If this was incompetence, they'd be right on occasion. So then vaccines come out. Holy crap, vaccines. So we have no idea how many adverse effects are actually happening with vaccines or who they're happening to because the only system that we have to occupy is VAERS. That's what we have to rely upon. The Vaccine Adverse Event Recording System. In the emergency use authorization granted to Pfizer and Moderna, it was said we will use VAERS to track any adverse effects, and that was the basis for the approval or the authorization. All right, great. So here's the problem. We have no idea how many are actually happening. Now, we were able to get every state to do contact tracing over the last 18 months, and anytime you came within 10 feet of somebody who ended up with a positive PCR test, you got daily phone calls and text messages following up on you. Would it have been impossible to redeploy that exact same resource to just everybody that got a vaccine? Because obviously there's a pretty good record. You had to sign up. You had to go get it. There's records of it. To just call all these people and say, hey, how you feeling? Do you have any of these conditions right now that we know are linked to the vaccine? No? Great. Do you have any other symptoms that you think might be, that have popped up since you got vaccinated? No? Wonderful. If something changes, please call us. We're going to check back with you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, they couldn't even have like a little online portal or just people just reported, they asked those same questions?
Or just have a follow-up of like, if you had these, then there's a follow-up phone call to ask and find out if it's legitimate. How hard would that have been? Would have been too simple. Now, here's my issue with vaccines above everything else. The way vaccine mRNA has been studied and worked on for at least 20 years. And in 20 years, no pharmaceutical company has been able to solve the problem of getting it into the body. Because if you do this over time, they kept finding the toxicity level got worse and worse and worse, and the body would attack, and they were having very negative reactions. They never even got to the point where it was safe enough to advance to human trials. Okay? We should all be kind of concerned about that. That seems not something you'd want to rush to the market. If you have never been able to prove the safety well enough that you could even get to a human trial to find out how bad it is, that's something we would want to know. But instead, now we jumped it because it was so effective. And then these fucking liars came out and said, oh, it's 94% effective. Bullshit. It was never that. That was relative risk, never absolute risk. Your relative risk was a nonsensical study that you put, the average age of the participant was 51 years old. Only 20% had comorbidities of any kind. How in the hell did you even find that many Americans without comorbidities? I genuinely want to know. I can't fathom finding that many people that don't have comorbidities, and that's who you studied this vaccine on. Meanwhile, in absolute terms, less than 1% of all people even got COVID in the study. Less than 1%. So your absolute rate dropped from 0.7% to 0.4% with this vaccine. Oh, my God, thank you. And the public health officials just went along with the marching orders. 94% effective. And some of us went, that's not going to hold. That's not true. You don't know what this is. This is nonsense. You fixed the study to come out this way. Oh, shut up, you science denier. All right, cool. I don't have any scientific degrees, so I shouldn't have an opinion. Got it. So then it starts waning. And some of us point out, hey, it's dropping. Look at Israel. It's not maintaining its effectiveness. Shut up. They would tell us if it was. All right. Months later, well, it appears the vaccine efficacy waves after about 2 months and then continues to drop until about 6 months. It's well below 20%. And initially it was 94% at preventing symptomatic cases of COVID. Then that stopped working. So they were like, well, it's actually just to prevent you from getting seriously ill and dying. And it looks like it might block transmission. And again, we looked at it and went, no, it doesn't. You can't conclude that from this. That's an unreasonable assumption and a baseless conclusion. And then people laugh at you and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then 3 months later, all right, well, it doesn't block spread. Doesn't even reduce it, as a matter of fact. Has no impact on your capacity to spread it. Awesome. Awesome job, guys. Way to go all the way around. So you have a vaccine that wears off, that has minimal benefit for most people. Again, if you're older, if you're very unhealthy, if you have comorbidities, if you have medical conditions, yeah, the risk reward probably makes sense. But we should stop pretending like there's not a risk reward question to be had, because there is. So outside of that, the vaccines, this mRNA vaccine is going to offer you very little reduction in your absolute risk of getting COVID, because here's the dirty little secret. It's an aerosolized respiratory virus, and it appears to be specifically engineered to spread more easily than most coronaviruses. You're gonna get it. It's a when, not an if. You're going to get it. Okay, that aside, the vaccine is not going to reduce your odds of getting it. It's going to offer you some protection against severe illness and death, which if you are under the age of 60 and not in severe health problems, your risk was already about 0. So I don't know how much more you want it reduced. Now, you have the risk of adverse reactions. And now we don't know. We know that over time, the more that you give mRNA to people, there appears to be a direct correlation to you have more toxicity, the body does not accept it well, and people are going to die. And they not only didn't do a long-term safety trial, there hasn't been one. The trial that they did do, they vaccinated the control group, so we have no chance at getting long-term data. And they are so confident in their process that they asked for 75 years to turn over all the documents related to the authorization. That's what our government asked for, 75 years to turn over the documents. These people are not on your side. I have no idea how you can still think they are. Like, we're not even getting into all of the lies that they have right now. Like, these are just the most obvious ones that they have had to do an about face on and admit later. And then they always claim the same bullshit. Well, the science updated, and this is what scientists do. We change when the data changes. The problem is the data didn't actually change. It's been the same thing. You made an unreasonable conclusion that was almost certainly going to be wrong. Some people called you out on it. It turns out you are wrong, and then you still claim victory. There's no way to falsify any of this. There's no way you're ever just wrong. School closures are an absolute embarrassment. The fact that my child still has to wear a mask every day when he goes to school, all of my children have to wear masks despite all of them being under 13, and an acknowledgement by every entity and organization that the mask is absolutely useless. They still have to go. My son's got a staph infection on his face. My other one's got rashes breaking out. For what? For what? So that you can not bruise the egos of these sociopaths that are setting all these rules? Fuck these people. They are awful. They don't care, and they are just doing untold harm to the population. This is not about public health. This is insanity. If it was about public health, we would want to know if there were adverse reactions to the vaccines. We would want parents to understand the real risk to their children and the comparative risk of the vaccine. Myocarditis appears to be mild. Are you people insane? Myocarditis appears to be mild? You don't know that yet. You couldn't possibly know that because, as it turns out, people that get significant myocarditis, which is typically young males who are at good health and zero risk of dying of COVID, there's an increased risk of heart failure later, of congestive heart failure, and all the kinds of other cardiac issues that will shorten your life. But it's mild? You're ready to say that after 6 months of data? Well, it's mild. Don't even worry about the myocarditis. You people you're sociopaths. You are evil. I don't know how you could be this indifferent to human life. It boggles my mind, and I know I should get over it by now because God knows I have enough experience with these people that it shouldn't be shocking, but it still is. And I can't fathom how people are still so in support of these policies, these procedures, these people that have done nothing but lie to you to sell you a drug for 12 months now. That's all they've done. Stéphane Bancel, the CEO of Moderna, is a sociopath. The guy's insane. And he's out like, well, people are definitely going to need a fourth shot of Moderna. Shocking. I mean, what are the odds that the guy who directly profits every time somebody puts one of those needles in their arm is going to tell you need more? Oh, don't worry. The first ones were free. Where have I heard that before? Oh, right. The first guy that tried to sell me drugs. Yeah, that was where that happened. Okay. It's almost like it's a proven model. And the vaccines aren't free. Our government is paying for them. Now, I don't know what the end game is to all of this. I don't know if this is some nefarious Build Back Better, the Great Reset, or if it's just your average general incompetence with massive egos refusing to acknowledge that you got anything wrong. And I'm not in the business of guessing why. I'm just in the business of knowing what is happening. And the amount of times that people are being misled, flat out lied to, and completely taken advantage of is so sickening. And watching them just go along with it and not just adhere. They are like converts to a church. They are so adamant in their beliefs. They came out and said masks aren't working. I went to my son's soccer game that night. Now, it's a big arena, it's a dome, but it's obviously inside because it's winter and we're in Syracuse. I don't wear a mask because I'm like, all right, well, obviously we know now that this is dumb. My wife and I were the only people without masks. They make the kids wear masks on the field. Like, my son had to come to me and be like, Dad, they said I can't play without a mask. He's 8. He's 8 years old about to go play soccer inside, but in a pretty big arena. And I said to him, they're not going to let you play? He said, no, the ref said I have to have a mask on. I said, all right, here, take my mask. And I gave it to him. So now my child has an adult mask on under his chin. And now he's good to go. Now we can play soccer. Like, what is wrong with people? How did you become this much of an ambassador for these sociopaths that run pharmaceutical companies?
Yeah, following up that, we got a comment in chat basically saying the same thing. That is like, my kid has to wear a mask while he wrestles. So
why? Like, this is insane. We have lost common sense. We have lost any semblance of reason. My son wrestles as well, and he's got to wear a mask. And I think it's the funniest thing in the world because he's old enough to kind of appreciate how stupid it is. So, like, we joke about it. I'm like, all right, so you did this. He's like, yeah, we did it. I was like, all right. You had that mask on, though. He's like, oh, I had the mask on. Can't be too careful. And it's hysterical because even he can see it's a joke. Like, we are doing this to soothe the egos of sociopaths who don't give a shit about you. I'm sorry, but it's reality. If they gave a shit about your children, schools would never have been closed outside of maybe March. That would have been the extent of it.
And let me follow up, too. So, like, they also, I don't have anything pulled up about it, but I remember reading something that they just admitted that the vaccine affects the menstrual cycle of women.
Oh, yeah, we were saying that. Like, why? This is my thing. I don't even know. I don't know how harmful vaccines are. I know that there is some potential for harm. But it's the fact that we're not allowed to ask, that we're not allowed to look at it, and that the government has zero interest in finding out what's going on. Every negative result of COVID, they run with to a mile. Like, oh, my God, it looks like it does this now, and it's going to kill you immediately, whatever. Every absurd thing that you're like, there's so little data in support of that. It's one study that's completely flawed. They're running 100 miles an hour. You get multiple women that are postmenopausal reporting that they are having menstruation again. And they're like, there is no evidence that the spike protein goes into the women's reproductive system. Like, so it's a fucking coincidence that these women are all having the same exact symptom? Like, well, what is going to be the effect on younger women with their menstruation? Shut up. There's no evidence that it affects menstruation. Okay, what about pregnancy? Well, there's no evidence that pregnant women are at any higher risk for vaccine adverse reactions. Okay, well, how many pregnant women were in the studies that you're basing this on? Well, none. They were specifically excluded from the study. We didn't allow any pregnant women in. Okay, but you can somehow conclude that it's safe? You are a sociopath. I'm sorry, but you're insane. I'm not telling you it is dangerous. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm saying there is no way you could draw that conclusion. And now the most glaring example, and everybody, you're not pissed about this enough. I don't care how mad you are not mad enough. They have been overcounting cases, hospitalizations, and deaths to scare the shit out of us for 2 years. And we knew this 2 years ago. We talked about it September of 2020. Hey, why haven't we gone through and like recounted the things? Now, I'm not even saying like, hey, four comorbidities and COVID got you. Cool, count it. Fine. The guy that died in a car accident obviously did not die of COVID. Can we eliminate that? Can we all agree? Everybody that was not at least some proximal cause, now they finally did it with hospitalizations in New York. Guess what? 40% of the people hospitalized in New York don't have COVID. And you know what these sociopaths do instead? Some representative from Upstate Hospital was like, well, if they're testing positive, that means they are still capable of spreading.
Nope.
You don't know that. What is the PCR cycle threshold set to? What day are they on? How many times are they tested? Are you testing them regularly? If they get a positive and then a negative, do they still count? Of course they do. Could you get more money? You're incentivized. So I'm so tired of watching people look at data, make absurd conclusions, and then when they get called out, the name calling starts. They can just dismiss you. It's been debunked. What you're saying was debunked. It's over. And then 6 months later, like, well, now with the new data we're getting with the Omicron variant, well, turns out masks aren't that effective. Time out. This is why I like what Scott Gottlieb said so much, because he didn't say shit about Omicron. He just said it's an aerosolized virus. Masks isn't going to do anything, which we've known for decades. You want to know what I found most remarkable about mass studies? How many of them conclude even in hospital settings that they're useless?
I know. I
was blown away by that. Like, so we just do this because...
And that was almost everybody's first go-to as, like, calling me stupid. Well, why do surgeons wear masks?
I don't know, but here's 4 studies that say that people without masks had lower infection rates than people with masks.
I'm like, regardless of whether or not that's not why they're wearing the masks, like, if they've been proven not to work there, too.
Right.
So,
but people don't want to hear this, and this is what I mean. They've become so... It's like a part of their identity is being this pro-COVID, the COVIDians and the COVIDiots, for lack of a better word. But it's just been lies. And this is where you're not mad enough, because the media took this and ran with it, and we are in a case-demic. We are in something where if we tested for the flu the way we test for COVID and then broadcast the public results, we would bunker down every single winter because it spreads. It's a respiratory virus.
Let me read a quote from Kathy Hochul on why that she's now separating cases with and of, right? So this is the enlightening, changing science that Kathy Hochul has become aware of. Hochul said she was prompted to investigate after noticing that total hospitalizations were remaining fairly steady, even as greater share were classified as COVID. So she has some epiphany by looking at the data that...
I hate these people so much.
And they wonder why we think there's lizard people.
Oh my God. I can't do this with these people anymore. Like, listen, seriously, consider this. If it wasn't for everybody telling you case counts every single day, just think about your own personal life, all right? How would this, and nothing was shut down, and you didn't have to wear a stupid piece of cloth over your mouth everywhere you go. Imagine none of that happened. Seriously, would you notice anything different than for people that you know getting ill, not testing positive, getting very, very ill, hospitalized, whatever? Would you notice any difference from this in like a bad flu year? You want to know what's really sad? With the new data that's coming out, it's becoming more and more obvious. It's exactly what it is. It was a bad flu year.
Yeah.
It was statistically almost no different. Now, yes, we have excess deaths this year. Yeah. It's almost like when you shut down an entire country, you scare the shit out of people for 2 straight years, and you also have a significant respiratory virus floating around, you're going to get bad results. I know that's a shock, but what we're doing isn't helping. It's only exacerbating the problem and making it worse. And here's the reality. Let's say that it turns out that the more times you administer mRNA to people, the more likely it is that they do get toxicity. That doesn't mean every person is going to die or have an adverse reaction to an mRNA vaccine. It doesn't. It means that statistically it's going to become more and more significant, which is what we are seeing, which is, you know how many, the COVID booster trial that Pfizer put together to test booster shots. There was a higher overall rate of COVID in that study than there was in the initial study. More people had COVID, and a higher percentage of people had tested positive for COVID across boosters, unboosters, and overall than tested positive in the original trial. Why aren't we asking why? Oh, it's Delta. It's just more transmissible. Bullshit. That does not explain the jump. This is crazy. And then with the 16 to 18-year-olds and the 15 to 12-year-olds, when they did the test for their booster shots, oh, no, wait, they didn't do any. They just said, yeah, go ahead and boost the kids with no safety trial. They didn't even bother with the pretext of running a trial for 12 to 18-year-old children. Awesome job, guys. This is why public health will never recover from what they have done to their own reputation. And quite honestly, every one of them should be fired and out of a job. They deserve it. Because now one of them has been honest about how to handle this. And they all are complicit in going along with this. And they destroyed lives. Kids will never get back the time that they have lost out on over the last 18 months. The number of people considering homeschooling their children at this point has never been higher. We're actively looking at it at this point. I never thought I would say that in my entire life. But all my children are being taught at school is, well, if you want to have a chorus concert, everybody's going to need to get vaccinated. I'm sorry, music teacher. Did you just give my child medical advice that I did not consent to? Are you really just saying this to my child, advising them to get an irreversible medical treatment that is only available via emergency use authorization so that they can have a concert? What? Like, look, this is insanity. And going back to this, now that they're admitting how over-counted all of this is, let it sink in. Let it really sink in, because here's the reality. It wasn't ever something that we had to do what we did for. It was never there, and they've done nothing but inflate this to make themselves more important. Anthony Fauci's over here like, I didn't do it for the prestige. Bullshit. I've never seen you not on a magazine cover. Every time you're out there talking, and you're lying. And then finally when they admit it, this I think is the most frustrating part. Nothing changes. Like Anthony Fauci a year ago on a podcast said, yeah, anything north of 35 cycles is not replicable virus. You can't culture it. It's not going to spread. Cool. Great. You finally admitted it. What policy changes did we make? None. We didn't change anything. We just kept running cycles past the 40 cycles and getting false positives. We knew the COVID with versus the COVID with COVID versus from COVID almost immediately. Like, we knew it was a problem, but the idea was, look, it's a pandemic. We don't want to undercount. We got to make sure we're getting everybody. All right, cool. It's been 2 years. Has anybody bothered to go back? Now they're finally starting to go back, and what they're realizing is, oh my God, it's actually like the hospitals are half. And this lie about the hospitals are almost at full capacity. That's because that's how they want to be. Hospitals are designed to be that way because that's how they make money. They need to treat people. They need to get people better. and have surgeries and sick people in order for them to bill insurances or people and make money. So no more than a arena wants to be at 50% capacity. A hospital doesn't want to be either, because then you're wasting resources on non-profit or non-revenue generating activities, and that's not the way to run a business. So every year for the flu, there's a rush on hospitals every year without fail. And it's no different now, except now, you know what's causing hospitals to become so overwhelmed? Asymptomatic positive tests are running in to try to get treated for nothing because they don't actually have it.
And the staff's reduced by 20%.
Smartest decision ever. And now this sociopath in New York is mandating booster shots for these poor healthcare workers.
Yeah, and so
this woman is the worst.
I put up the chart so you guys could all look at it if you have referencing what Ben was talking about, the with COVID and because of COVID, the New York. So they broke it all by region. So we're number one, Ben, Central New York.
Yay.
Only 20% of our COVID cases are not COVID cases.
Do you realize how generous this definition is, though?
I know.
Okay,
I know.
just to help the people at home.
But even that, 1 out of 5 is basically stalked and treated as if they had COVID.
Right. So the definition is COVID or something related. So if you got RSV and you happen to test positive for COVID, obviously you count. Or if you have any other respiratory tract thing, then you also test positive for COVID. You still count, even if it's not what actually brought you in. And this is particularly prevalent in children, because it turns out children are gross. They are disease and virus vectors and have been forever. Now, as much as I love watching my son drop his mask on the ground, step on it with his boot, and then put it on his face and thinking, well, that's got to be good for him. Or how about just the stupidity that we all suffer from of, I'm going to throw the groceries on the passenger seat. I'm going to take them inside. Now I'm going to throw my mask on the passenger seat or in the purse or in my pocket, because obviously that's a sterile environment. And then I'm going to jam it right onto my face and wear it for 8 hours. And nobody's going, wait, this seems like maybe more harm than good. So all of these things, it's still exaggerated. It's still higher than reality. I don't know by how much, but I'm sure it's still higher than it is. And even by these numbers, the idea that we panicked is so unfounded.
Yeah, and I shared that article. I feel like LA did a similar thing, and they found that 2/3 of their patients were not COVID or not there because of COVID.
Right. So it's a simple
So
idea.
again, I tell everybody, you know, we've been beat over the head with this number of, yeah, tell that to the 820,000 people who died. Like literally every single time there's a new number released, they beat you over the head with that number. But that number is not real. It's never been real, and it will eventually catch up. Like this, all this stuff here that you know, the oven because of with COVID, whatever, all that terminology you want to use, this is all going to come out because the truth always comes out.
I don't know how to explain this to people, so I'm going to just do it in the simplest terms possible. 8,000 people on average die every day in America. So the idea that over 100 days on average, you'd have 800,000 dead Americans. That's just the way it is. See, it's almost like a design flaw in our species. We die.
Trying to fix that.
100% efficacy, we will die. 100% certainty, you will die. Jesus Christ came back, but you know what? He still died. All right? So even I think he died twice, if anything. So it might even be above 100%. So at that point, I'm sorry, but yes, these people died. And you know what? You're going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die. We're all going to die. It is the only certainty in life, is that it comes to an end at some point.
Hashtag Micronova.
I mean, that let's not go down that road right now. But my point is, yes, I'm sorry that these people died. And every death is its own tragedy to every person that knows and loves and is close to this person. No question. But you don't make public health policy to stop every person from dying, because it's impossible. We're going to die. I'm sorry. I wasn't there when the decision was made. It's above my pay grade. If you have a problem with that, you're going to have to take it up with God or Enki or Enlil or El, or whatever, you know, somebody higher than me on the food chain, because I don't know what to tell you, but I'm sorry. You're going to die. If I'm the first person to explain that to you, I apologize for the shock that this must present. But I'm trying not to enjoy this. Watching people come to the realization of how crazy and how incompetent government really is sort of enjoyable. And it's almost like bittersweet, though. I'm a little sad about it, because it's like the loss of innocence when you realize how terrible these people are. When I got friends that are talking to me now like, what was the point of all this? Like, Yeah, I'm sorry. Like I said, let me ask you a question. Knowing what you know now, knowing that now they're talking boosters and everything else, would you have gotten a vax if you knew this? No shot. All right, that's what I figured. And it's almost like they lied on purpose. They got the result they wanted. All roads led to the vaccine. There was no options for early treatment. Imagine any virus, respiratory virus in particular, where the standard of care that was untouchable, and if you tried to vary away from it, you were called a heretic, a lunatic. You were threatened with getting your license to practice medicine taken away. The standard of care was, yeah, you got COVID. Go home. If you start to get to the point where you can't breathe, come back. Well, what are you going to do if that happens? We'll watch you. Well, are we going to do anything about it? Yeah, well, we'll watch you, and then if it gets real bad, we'll put you on a ventilator. Now they've got at least steroids and fluvoxamine and stuff like that. Oh, my God, I forgot about Regeneron. Now, is that the name of it? Remdesivir. I forgot about that. Was the best. Oh, my God. They did one study on remdesivir that had zero effect on morbidity whatsoever. Even in the controlled trial, no impact on mortality whatsoever. Same number of people died. The only thing they found in the data was, well, shortened hospitalizations by a day or two. And Anthony Fauci called that the standard of care for COVID in America. No reduction in mortality whatsoever. And now it turns out, reasonably likely chance that it's causing kidney failure in a lot of these people. Who knew that maybe when you rush brand new drugs, there's every now and then negative consequences. Stop listening to these sociopaths. Stop.
All right. Well, that plea leads us to our last topic of the day here. You guys have probably heard this term, mass formation psychosis. Maybe mass psychosis is probably easier for when I don't know, I'm probably going to butcher it a couple of times. But this has basically come to a trending topic online in large part because of Joe Rogan and Dr. Robert Malone. So during the second of the two medical podcasts that are changing the world, if you will, Dr. Malone mentioned mass formation psychosis as suggesting that basically millions of people have been somehow hypnotized by this COVID narrative. And just I want to report here, the AP has come out and said an unfounded theory used to dismiss COVID measures. So they fact-checked this, and they've claimed it to be unfounded, that there is no mass psychosis. Now, I present to you Exhibit A for mass formation psychosis.
Hit me.
I'm going to read it. Now, let me give you a little bit of background. I just happen to be reading this article not for anything related to COVID.
Sure.
And you can start, as I start reading, you'll realize why. It's a terrible story. The headline reads, Police. Burned, beaten, and disfigured woman escaped estranged husband's Perth torture chamber. Now, Perth is in Fulton County, New York. I was reading a local news aggregator.
As you do.
As I do. And this popped up. I was like, oh, my God. And there's a, as you can see for the people viewing at home, the gentleman has quite a presence. Right? So this picture was with the headline. So I was like, oh, look at this clown. I'm going to click on this and figure out.
I might know this dude.
I'm going to figure out what was going on here. So this dude, let me read the first paragraph. A Fulton County man and his girlfriend allegedly held his estranged wife captive in a trailer home for nearly a week, subjecting her to days of brutal torture that culminated in the attackers cutting off one of the woman's fingers and then using a flame to stop the bleeding, according to reports filed by the police investigation. Now,
Jesus.
It gets worse. I'm not even going to read more of this stuff because there's literally more torture, and I can't even read it. But I'm going to, as I was reading this, I come down to an area where it turns out, so she escapes, right? So the captor, the couple, I don't know if there was just one or two of them, but they put her in the back of a truck and drive her or whatever. The captor gets out of the vehicle. She runs and escapes, right? So she's fleeing after being tortured for a week. She finds herself at a grocery store in Gloversville. And then I'm just going to read
verbatim
what happened here. So Franco said the woman ran in around 2:30 p.m. Thursday, frantically seeking help and asking for a cab to Fruit Street in Gloversville, but didn't have a face mask on and wasn't interested in taking one they tried to offer her. He said his son called the cab, but asked the woman to wait outside because she refused to put on the mask. She refused to put on the mask, Ben. She fucking refused to put on the mask, and they made her stay outside.
I mean, at least it's Syracuse, New York in January.
Well, it's Gloversville, but
whatever.
Same thing. Same neck of the woods for sure.
Oh, my God.
So this is who would do that? I mean, reading through this article, she's visibly beaten, right? She's like bruised and
she's missing a finger.
That
got soldered back on. I'm sure that wasn't a clean.
And could you imagine? I don't know. I'm guessing at some point over that week, she probably was gagged or of some point, and you're asking her to do this mundane, stupid thing that she's literally freaking out. She just escaped from a kidnapping.
A torture chamber.
For a week. She probably thought she was dying multiple times that week, and she runs to help, and she can't get help without a mask. If that is not mass formation psychosis, because who in their right mind is even thinking of that?
Nobody.
That clerk is clearly like gone off the reservation. Whatever's happened there, it is. If they're not to admit that there's some psychosis going on, then people have become the cruelest people on the planet. I mean, what is going on here? How did we get to this point? Can it end at any point?
I think that the fundamental problem with humanity today is arrogance, is that we look back at things like the witch trials and Japanese internment camps, and we like to think to ourselves, man, well, thank God we've evolved past that. We would never do something like that again. We look back at Nazi Germany and think, wow, thank God. With today, we would never do such a thing. And here's the simple reality.
The burning of the witches?
The burning of the witches, the burning of the Jews, the ritualistic genocide in Rwanda, like, stuff happens. The Turkish genocide of Armenia, like, there's all these historical examples, and we always think so arrogantly that we would now, because we are so much more evolved in our timing compared to where we were not even 100 years ago, which historically speaking is a blink. So the idea that it can't be possible is the problem. Because every person thinks, I would never do something that evil, and therefore whatever I do is not that evil and is justified. And here's the simple reality. Every one of us, me, you, my children, my wife, my parents, every human being on this earth is capable of tremendous acts of evil and tremendous acts of good. It's what separates us from animals, is that we all have this capacity. Betty White?
No.
Yes. Well, not anymore. Because now she fit into that 100% category. I mean, she was probably the best chance of proving that not everybody's going to die, but, she made it. So, it's just, we all assume that we're not capable of it, but the simple reality is you are. And we know so little about the brain and how it works that we don't fully grasp what it would take. Like, it's easy to say, how did all these people go along with that?
Yeah, listen, we talked about the Milgram experiment like a year ago.
Right. And it's happening in real time, just like the adherence to authority will do that. And we're all capable of it. And if you don't acknowledge that, it's a problem, because if you assume that you are better, and this is what I mean about arrogance, is we assume that we're so much smarter than we are. We assume that we're so much better than we really are. And we shouldn't. Like, we should all have more humility and acknowledge what we don't know. That's my biggest gripe with public health, is it's just a lack of humility. It's arrogance. It's you're coming out and then you don't want to be wrong because you have this massive ego that we all have to stoke by continuing wearing masks. Stop. Like, just acknowledge, hey, we got a lot wrong, but you know what? We panicked and we shouldn't have. So now we're going to correct things. And they don't do that. They come out and they try to gaslight you and act as if, well, this is what we've been saying all along. No, it's not. And people just go with this. And it's, if you don't acknowledge that you're capable of these things, if I asked 100 people, hey, if a woman came into your store and had just clearly been abused, you don't know tortured, but she comes in an absolute panic and is trying to get out of there, is trying to escape, but she didn't have a mask on, would you make her wear a mask? 100 people out of 100 are going to say no. Of course not. That's crazy. And yet it happened. And now this is the real funny part. You all want to think that you're better than that shop owner and that there's no chance it could have been you. It's not true. It could have been you. We all want to think with the milligram experience. I would have been the one person that would not have administered the painful dosing of electricity. No, that's not what the odds say. The odds say you absolutely would if you're not informed about it and understand that you're capable of it. I would be the 1 out of 3 people that didn't administer a lethal dose of electricity just because a man in a lab coat told me to. Well, odds say you'd be one of the 2 out of 3 because that's how odds work. So this has got to stop. We are heading down a very, very bad road. And at every point where we could steer off of it and say, okay, we can all agree on this at least, right? Like we can all acknowledge this is nuts. We're not doing it. Like, how many articles do you have to see telling you that your cloth mask is useless before you stop wearing it? How many do you got to see? Because right now you're doing something that makes no sense. And now they're going to talk about mandating KN95s. No. Listen, number one.
Have fit testing stations at the gas station?
No, of course not. Like it has to be properly fit to your face, and it has to remain sterile to have any effect. Also, you can't mandate it because the KN95 is only for the wearer. It offers no protection against transmission. It will not. They can't even bullshit you to say that it will the way they did with the cloth and surgical masks. It won't, and they know it won't. So what is the public health benefit? This is no different than forcing everybody to wear a hat because it's sunny outside and they don't want you to get sunburned. You don't have that authority. I'm allowed a certain level of personal autonomy. That is an inalienable right of being. If they can take that away, then it's not a right. It's that simple. So stop. Just stop going along with this. Listen, I understand it's awkward to be the only guy in Wegmans without a mask on, but it's got to start somewhere. You got to stop doing this. We have to stop just blindly following these sociopathic edicts from people that don't care. And they're more concerned about not being proven wrong than they are about doing any kind of good. That's the priority list.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to see any more shining examples of mass formation psychosis.
You're going
anywhere near.
We're not stopping. People are doubling down. This is like when a cult has decided that the spaceship is coming to ruin humanity and then it doesn't happen.
Lace up your Nikes.
People, listen, this is a crazy thing about human psychology. When that happens, the cult members become more devout to the cult than before. When it so clearly does not come to fruition, there's an excuse made and they become more adherent to the teachings of the cult. This is well studied. Again, that's not other people. It's you. It's me. It's Shawn. This is how our brains work. You have to be aware of that so that you can maintain any level of objectivity as you're going forward. Understand that it can be you. It can happen.
Well, so, and I don't want to, we've gone a little bit long here, but I do want to do one follow-up question on or idea. So if we think there's some kind of psychosis going on, which I think there is, and I've been calling it scrambled brain, but it's literally, this is the same thing that what I've been talking about. Like people,
to some level, I agree.
It's like, okay, there's something going. People's brains are not functioning right. Mm-hmm. They've been, like I said, we talked about. We didn't really break down what mass formation psychosis is, or how you get there. I think they talked about some of this stuff. I don't even think they talked about it on the Rogan podcast, but I've heard other people talk about it. So it starts with social isolation, right? So you get these people isolated away from additional perspectives. You create despair or some kind of fear with that person. So while they're isolated, now they're fear. And then you give them the solution, right? So and that's what we're at now. Like these people basically offered the vaccine and these leaders as a solution to all the fear that they basically instilled for a year and a half, and they gave them the one. So as you were talking about with the cult members getting more cultish as the intensity of the cult
when it's more
activities,
obvious,
right? When they need to, that's when they're really looking for leadership, and they basically become sheep, as we like to say, and really just follow the leader, and they just follow the lab coat, and they follow whatever they're going to do. And so the question is was it done on purpose, really, right? So,
I don't know.
So
I can't answer that question, and that's what I've said this multiple times.
And if it was done on purpose, when did it
when did it become about
that? When did it become that?
I don't know.
When did they say, hey, we got something here, and maybe we can just ramp this up and create something?
I have been saying this since at least a year ago. I hope it's just a money grab. I do. I hope it's just a money grab. And I don't know if it is, because this is blatant. Like, this is so over the top with the falsities that they are spewing that it's really hard to understand how they could do that if it was just to go make money.
So we've been asking how they're going to unwind it, and literally they're just going to unwind it right in our face.
They're just going to, like, their unwinding strategy is basically, fuck you.
Yeah.
That's the strategy.
It's like, yeah.
Do something about it.
Yeah.
Like, we lied. Oh, well.
Right.
I mean, but I still, this is my suggestion to everybody of how do you combat whatever is happening. Mass formation psychosis, if it's just, I don't know, Stockholm syndrome. Like, I don't know what is happening on a mass scale right now, but things are off. The best advice I can offer is turn inward, not outward. Don't go try to save the world. Don't go try to change anybody else. Go worry about your kids, your family, get your house.
Be the change you want to be.
That's it. Like, don't try to combat this. Just be different. Everybody else is trying to tell somebody else how to live. Don't do it. Just turn inward. Make sure you are taken care of and your house is ready. And then that will naturally lead other people to like, oh, yeah, I guess that is it. Nobody wants to be told they're wrong. Nobody wants to be convinced that they are incorrect. They have to come to that conclusion by themselves. They have to. That's another aspect of human psychology that is well studied. So, yeah, like, go and be a good person. Go take care of your family. Go take care of your loved ones. And if somebody's going crazy on you, accept it. Like, I told the story. A guy yelled at me in the mall. And like, my kids are there watching. And it would have been very easy to get into an argument. I know I'm right. But what was the upside? Look, this guy is not a bad guy. He's just scared. And he's out of his mind right now. Like, that's not something you would normally do in a given winter, even in a bad flu season, is come up to a total stranger volunteering for the Salvation Army and yell at them like, why aren't you wearing a mask? Why are you wearing a mask? Like, what are we doing here? And the idea was just very simple. Like, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me. I hope you have a great day. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday. That was it. End of the, well, he took my picture too, which I thought was hysterical. And I gave him the biggest smile I could. But this has been my attitude now because you and I have been doing this for 2 years now. That, like, we've been talking. Yeah,
we got our picture. We got our picture taken on a golf course.
We did. That's right. I forgot about that. That was hysterical. You know, they told us not to go outside. Outdoor training, the topic, and they're not going to ignore it. So I'm just not doing it anymore. I'm not fighting with anybody about their mask policy. I'm not arguing. I'm just not doing it. Like, I'm going to take care, and we are probably going to end up homeschooling our children because this is insanity. Remote learning, if nothing else, taught me how much time is wasted in an average school day. It's unbelievable. Like, we went through every lesson our kids had starting at 9 a.m. and we were done by 11. And my wife and I are looking at each other like, so we need to work and you guys need to go somewhere and do something else. Like, we can't entertain you because we still have jobs that require more than 2 hours. So, but we started to look more into, all right, how do we prepare our kids to make sure they will never succumb to something like this? And that was what led to some very interesting and deep conversations on what are our kids being taught in public schools or even in private schools. Like, they all have to go along and wear masks and not ask any questions, and they're not questioning the authority of the government. I mean, for real, the governor literally just said mask mandate starting Monday. No legal basis for it whatsoever. And everybody went, I guess we got to wear masks. Like, what a failing of a public education system that you are so uninformed on how government is supposed to work that we all just went, yeah, I guess we got to start wearing masks again. It's a tragedy. So then it became, all right, well, how do we prevent this? Not trying to change the world. How do I take care of my children to make sure they will not be a part of this problem in the future? Because this will not be the last time something like this happens.
Yeah.
Will it?
I hope in my lifetime.
Think about how beneficial this has been for all the key players. You think they're going to let this go?
I mean, you'd like to think that people, like you and I and the millions of people would never let it happen again. Like,
what evidence have you seen to make you draw that conclusion?
Only because more people listen. So I think you would admit that there's more people outwardly and publicly pushing back than there were when we first started.
For sure,
there, right? So
we were some lonely voices early on.
I know. So I feel like the starting point is just at a different place, right? So, like, that's if they try to do this, there's way more people who are being like, BS detectors should go up literally immediately, which mine did. Like, I feel like I was I've said this a bunch of times, like, I'm so glad that somehow I stumbled across some information that made me question the narrative, right? So, like, I don't even know where it started, but at some point I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I went someplace else. I found it someplace else. I found someplace else. I found a handful of people who were talking about something that nobody else was talking about. And here we are 2 years later, and the information is endless. So I do have more faith that at least it's less likely to happen in the future.
Fair. I don't share your faith, but I'm hoping.
But what happens is people like me are going to die off. And, I could joke or compare it a little bit about 9/11, right? The same thing. Like, there's just like psychosis that came around that. Oh. And the expansion of government that immediately followed that act could easily be equated to what they're trying to do here. So maybe they just need a couple generations to die off before they try to implement it again. So, all right. We should wrap up here. Any lasting words on mass formation psychosis or any other hot and zany topics we covered today at the Sports Clicks and Politics?
I talked way too much today. I'm good.
Well, we had a lot of things to talk about. So, all right. Well, I
apologize for the cursing.
On that note, we thank you for joining us again on episode 80. We'll be back here next Monday at 12 p.m. for episode 81. Please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell and get some notified when we go live. And any new other content we do. And you audio viewers, make sure you are leaving us a 5-star rating review on the podcast provider wherever you're listening to your podcast. And on that